Okay, now let's go over some tkinter questions. These are a little harder to write questions about, so these are going to be a little different from the rest. So looking at what we have here, we have a block of code that creates a tkinter program. And then the question here that's being asked is, for this code block above, what text does the label widget display when the program is first run before clicking the button, after clicking the button once, clicking the button twice, clicking the button 3 times? Okay, so there's only one label widget, and we just have to know what is going to display after each button click. So let's read this code here. We're importing tkinter. We're calling it tk instead of tkinter. Okay, we have a couple of functions. Not sure what these do yet. I'll come back to those. We're creating a tkinter window, so it's going to display widgets for us. Here we're creating a label which is called L, and this text, the text on the label is going to be hello. And then we are placing the label onto the window using the grid command. We're placing it in row 1, column 1, so probably the top left corner with a little bit of padding around it. Okay, and then we're creating a button called B. The button reads the button reads OK, and the button calls the function F. And then we're placing the button onto the window using grid, and we're placing it to the right of the label. Okay, so I can already go ahead and answer the first question here. When the program is first run before clicking the button, so before clicking the button, the label reads hello. It's just that text right there that the label was created with. Okay. Now, after clicking the button once, so what's going to happen when I click the button once is it's going to call this command F. So we're going to call the F function up here. So then after clicking once, clicking button, after clicking, we'll call it B once, label reads, so it's going to read whatever it's configured to right here. So this l.configure is configuring the text of the L label to say goodbye. So that is what it's going to say next after we click the button. But now there's another thing that happens in this function right here that's very important, and that is that we now configure the B button to call a different function. So now after clicking B once, B now calls G if clicked. So like if you click it again, it'll now call G. Okay. So that means if we click B again, now we call the G command, we call the G function right here. Okay. So we get down to here, we carry out this command if we click the button twice. So this is after clicking B twice. Label is now going to read whatever it's configured to say here. So we meet again. So we go hello, goodbye, we meet again. Okay. And then we configure the button again. So like after clicking the button again, so if we click it twice, B will now call G if clicked again. Okay. So like this means if you click it again. Okay. So basically like the commands go back, it switches back and forth. Like first the button has the F command and then it has the G command, and then G switches it back to F, and then F switches it back to G. Right. So like what command is called when you click the button keeps switching back and forth. Okay. So after we click, now that we've clicked B twice, B is now going to call G, or sorry, it's going to call F if we click it again. So this is F right here. Okay, and that means that after clicking 3 times, so if we click it one more time, oh, sorry, it's just we wanted to know about what the label's going to say, right? So we can put another line here that after clicking B 3 times, label reads whatever it says up here again, which is goodbye. Okay, so that is the entire analysis there. It's a little bit complicated, but just have to follow what is Python going to have these buttons configured to do. So you could kind of write down what the different commands and text are, and then like keep crossing them out as you imagine pressing the button again and again. Okay, let's look at the next one. So in this one, we're importing tkinter as tk. We have some functions. I'll come back to those. Creating a tkinter window. And we have a variable here called score, which starts out at 0. We are creating a label called L, and it looks like the text that L displays is just the string version of score. So it's going to start off displaying 0. And that was actually the first question here, is when the program is first run, what does the label widget display? So before clicking anything, label shows 0. Okay, so the string version of the score right here. All right, then we're placing the label onto the grid. It looks like the top left corner. Then we're creating a button called A, which helpfully calls has the text saying button A. And button A calls command F if we click it. Looks like we're putting that in the second row on the left. We have another button called B, which has the text button B, and it calls command G. And then we're putting that on the window in the second row to the right. And then this just makes sure the program runs. Okay, so what's going to happen if we click button A twice, if we click button A twice and then button B once, or if we click button A once and button B 3 times? So I assume I didn't maybe describe this very well, but like it basically meaning like we run the program and then we only click button A twice for this question. For this question, it's you run the program and then you click button A twice, button B once. And so like you haven't done this part up here before. Like you didn't click A 4 times. You just started the program and then button A twice, button B once, if that makes sense. I'll try to be more clear on the actual test. But okay, so what happens if we click button A twice? Well, the first time we click button A, it's going to call command F. Okay, so let's see what function F does up here. So we've declared score as a global variable. That means whatever we do to score will change the original value of score down here in the main code. So we're taking score and we are adding 10 to score. So after one click, score equals, it's now going to equal 10. And then after 2 clicks, score is going to equal 20. Okay, and then we are configuring the label widget L to show that. And that's pretty much it. So label shows 20 after clicking A twice. Great, so not very complicated. We're not changing what function the buttons call at any point. All right, so that's the answer to this one. Now, if we click button A twice and button B once, look at what clicking button B does. So it looks like button B is basically the same thing, except it subtracts 5. So basically, button A adds 10 to the score, button B subtracts 5 from the score, and this is just displaying the score again. So if A is clicked 2 times and B clicked 1 time, score becomes, so it'll be 20 after doing it twice up here, it's going to be 15 down here. It's because we just subtract 5 1 time. Okay, and that's what the label is going to display. So label 15. All right, and then the last question was click button A once, button B 3 times. So button A once would take us from 0 to 10, and then button B 3 times, so we'll go from 10 down to 5, down to 0, and then down all the way to -5. All right, so that's it for that question. Let's look at the next one. So this is an interesting one. We have some functions. I'll skip over those and look back later. We're creating a window. Okay, so we have 3 labels here. One called X, one called Y, one called Z, and they just display their names. So label X, label Y, label Z. And looks like we're putting X into row 1, call 3, Y goes into row 2, call 1, Z goes into row 2, call 2. And then we have 3 buttons, A, B, and C. So they just display their own names, button A, button B, button C. Button A goes row 3, column 1, button B goes row 3, column 2, button 3 goes row 3, column 3. So these 3 buttons are aligned in the 3rd row, and then these labels are kind of all over the place. And then if we look at what happens when we click these buttons, so A calls F, B calls G, and C calls H, so they're in alphabetical order. So clicking button A does this, clicking button B does this, clicking button C does this. So what happens when we call grid again is basically it just moves whatever this thing was that we called .grid on. And these X, Y, and Z, these are the labels. So what's going to happen when we click these buttons is the labels are moving to new places. So this question is basically all about, like, do you recognize how the grid system works? Like rows and columns. Okay, so for this code block, there are 4 possible states for the labels. So there's the initial state, state after pressing button A, after pressing button B, after pressing button C. What I mean by state is like the way they're arranged. Match the 4 pictures below to the 4 states. Okay, so initially, before we click a button, the location of X is row 1, column 3. So which of these has X in row 1, column 3? This first one here, this does look like row 1, column 3 for X. Let me see if X is in the same place in any others. Nope. So I think this is the initial state right here, just based on where X is at. Can double check on Y and Z. Let's see, row 2, column 1 for Y. Yep, that's row 2, column 1. And then row 2, column 2 for Z. Yep, that's where Z is. Okay, so state 1 is the configuration before pushing buttons. All right, then after clicking A, we get this arrangement of X, Y, and Z. So X is in row 2, column 3. So row 2, column 3, row 2, column 3, row 2, column 3. This looks like what happens after clicking button A, and that's the only one that has X in row 2, column 3. So I'll go with this one for what happens after we click button A. Okay, we can double check by looking at the other 2. So that has Y and Z both in row 1, which, yeah, this also has Y and Z in row 1. Okay, now after I click button B, it's going to do this. So that has X in row 1, column 2. Row 1, column 2, row 1, column 2 is this one. So that looks like after button B. And then we could use process and elimination, or we can look at these ones for what happens after button C. So after button C, X should be in row 2, column 1, row 2, column 1, row 2, column 1, row 2, column 1. This one should be after button C. This would presumably be a little easier on the actual test because you're not scrolling around and you can kind of look at the whole question at the same time, hopefully. All right, so that was it for the tkinter section.